James Crumbly about to face trial, or actually is facing trial as you're watching this right now. 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, the same counts that his wife Jennifer Crumbly was found guilty on recently, all stemming from Ethan Crumbly, their son, the school shooter at Oxford High School, executing several of his classmates. Is this going to be a different case, or is this pretty much going to go down the same way? Defense attorney Bob Motta, host of the podcast Defense Diaries, joining me to discuss. Yeah, what do you think? Same repeat here, just different person, or is this a dramatically different setup than what Jennifer had?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be different. I think that there's different facts. I think that he was negligent, recklessly negligent in different ways, than Jennifer was. So we're gonna see different evidence, for
Hmm.
certain. This is not going to be like a instant replay with just we're plugging James Crumbly in instead of Jennifer Crumbly.
Hmm.
There's gonna be a lot of things that we didn't see and hear about, or maybe that were intimated to during Jennifer's trial, but we're going to get into it a lot more in this with respect to what he knew and what he should have known and what he did and what he didn't do and what he should have done. So it's going to be different, but I think it's going to be the same result.
It seems like a lot of the testimony that was given, at least in Jennifer's case, about him was he was driving for Uber, and he was very absent for quite a while. Lost his job, was depressed, trying to just make ends meet and do whatever he could for his family, and that involved being in that car, doing the Uber driving. How much do you think that's going to play into this, as far as him being present or having a part, in his son's life leading up to the shooting?
I mean, I think the defense will try to use it, maybe a little bit, that he was dealing with his own issues. That does not absolve you, as from your duty as a parent to make sure that you know what's going on in your kid's life. Ultimately, I think the bigger facts in this case are going to be is that he is the one who physically purchased the weapon.
Mhm.
That's a very different fact than, Jennifer. Like they were saying, well, she didn't know. She didn't even know that he bought him a gun until he brought the gun home. So that's going to be a big thing there. But ultimately at the end of the day, uh, they're gonna be hammering home on the text messages
Yeah.
between Jennifer and James, just talking about the things that were going on with Ethan and, some of his responses, which were to say the least, they seem to be disregarding what was going on with his son. Kind of like rub some dirt on it, you'll
Hmm.
be fine type
Suck it
thing.
up were the words.
Yeah,
Yeah. Take some
exactly.
pills.
Right.
Yeah.
So, those things are all going to come out. And then ultimately, the thing that I always thought was the most just damning, most powerful piece of evidence is, of course, the note,
Mhm.
that Jennifer was sent and that he saw and was in the office, the morning of the shooting. And that fact alone for me was what really put me over the edge in terms of culpability. It's hard to know what your teenage kids are doing all the time, so if I had cut off the fact pattern right there
Mhm.
and had that note or the math test not existed in my world, I may have been more easily swayed in terms of, I mean, it's possible that they wouldn't know because teenagers, look, they're learning how to become adults. They've got their own things going on. Many times they don't want us involved in their personal business,
Mhm.
and that seems very much to have been the case in that household. Whether or not the text to the friend from Ethan to his buddy was like, I've asked my parents for help. I asked my dad for help and they ignored it. Whether or not they can prove that up in terms of James will be interesting,
Mhm.
because if he's begging for help and they're ignoring it, then it's even more damning, but
Yeah.
I just don't know if he's telling his buddy that and it never actually happened, but I anticipate it's going to be the exact same result.
Yeah.
I'm frankly, I'm surprised a little bit, and not that he didn't plead out because I don't know what the offer is. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And we don't know what the sentence is going to be. They really rushed this trial because I think they wanted to beat sentencing because, ultimately it's going to fall on the judge at this point. And I don't know what the offer is. The offer may have been something astronomical where the defense is like, all right, well, you're trying to give us a 60 on this. You're trying to go full boat on this thing.
Hmm.
And, I don't know what the judge is going to do. Like, and we don't know where the judge is going to fall on this. The judge could fall on, going on the minimums on this, and we don't know, and we won't know until sentencing. So, like, for his defense attorney, that's, you're in a tough spot in terms of advising your client as to what you should do or what
Sure.
you think that they should do. So, that was something that I thought was kind of an interesting thing, and I would have thought that they would have tried to delay the trial, which I think the judge would have denied anyway, but I was surprised that they didn't try to do it.
One thing that happened in Jennifer's trial, they had school witnesses take the stand, talking about the emotions of what was going on in that school as the shooting was going on, turning over bodies, determining who was what. One teacher had the moment of realization that it was Ethan who was the shooter. This is a trial that's not necessarily about the actual shooting itself. It's more so about what led up to it, what
Right.
allowed the shooting to take place. Do you expect to see those same type of witnesses in this trial? Should they have even been in Jennifer's trial? Obviously, they play well to a jury if you're trying to convict somebody because it was emotional as hell. But at the same time, again, I could see him in Ethan's trial. It didn't, to me, it didn't make a lot of sense in Jennifer's trial. But you're more of the expert on that than I am.
Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry.
Sure.
So I think ultimately they're going to have to put them on because what they have to do is they still have to remember it's involuntary manslaughter, but it's still a homicide
Hmm.
case. So it's basically they're gonna have to prove the element that people died in the shooting,
Okay.
and that as a result they're gonna have to put those witnesses on. Whether they'll put as much on, I doubt it. I think that it kinda went a little over what it needed to,
Hmm.
but they have to prove each and every element of the crime, and even in involuntary manslaughter, again, that still falls under the homicide statute. You
Sure.
have first degree, second degree, and then you have manslaughter and then involuntary manslaughter. Those are all homicides. What the difference is in intent. The intent aspect of it is missing for involuntary manslaughter, meaning they didn't have to intend for somebody to die in order to be convicted on it. But they still have to establish that people lost their lives or a person lost their lives in order to prove up each and every element of the case
Mhm.
or of that particular charge.
It does seem to me that these parents fairly ignorant when it comes to mental health. Uh, there's ignorance, there's willful ignorance, and there's just I don't give a shit about my kids. I don't think these were people who didn't give a shit about their kids. I do think they were ignorant, but were they willfully ignorant? Is it okay to expect parents to know in what mental health needs their child has all the time, especially when they are getting advice from the school saying, it's okay, the kid can stay here. They could have brought him home, but I mean, they were getting some advice in some places and some in not. I mean, it's easy, very easy, I think, for you or for me to say, if my kid was doing this, first things I'd be doing would be getting mental health help. I don't think that that's always the initial reaction that some parents have just because of their knowledge of what that means and what that is and the stigmas that may have been surrounding them throughout their lives. Is that something that should be taken into account, or is this just more
Yeah,
so
and
figure your shit out and then be a better parent?
yeah, no, I think that it is, and going into the Crumbley case, which I covered on my YouTube channel,
Hmm.
which everyone when I cover trials, you should really check it out.
Yeah.
It's Defense Diaries podcast. My wife and I are both criminal defense attorneys, and we
Hmm.
give a different perspective than a vast majority of the true crime channels out there.
Yeah.
But like going into that, I felt it was a very, very critical case for the not just for Michigan, but for the entire country because of exactly what you're talking about. And that is dealing with the accountability of parents with respect to the actions of their children outside of their presence. And, I kept trying to tell people, I'm like, look, if she's found guilty on this thing, that changes everything moving forward in this country, not just the state of Michigan. And I think that we talked about that after that verdict.
Yeah.
But, it's going to be a case by case situation. It's not just a blanket thing where like people are like, oh no, every time my kid does something. No, no, but what they're going to do is they're going to look at it
Yeah.
and they're going to say, look, you had every warning sign you needed and you chose to ignore it. And because of that, we're going to hold you culpable for it.
Mhm.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I've got 4 kids. You know what? And my bar is what my bar is in terms of being a parent. You have to be present in your kids' lives. Now, if I had no knowledge whatsoever that my kid was off the rails and somehow that was flying under my radar and they couldn't prove that I had knowledge of it, then I'm not guilty of anything. If I knew or should have known because I had warning signs left and right and I just wasn't doing anything about it, then you know what? If somebody lost their life, I feel that I'd be culpable for that.
Sure.
I'd feel guilty. I'd feel like, man, if I would have done anything as a parent, if I would have been more involved in my kid's life, those kids or that kid or that person wouldn't be dead. So that's ultimately what's going to happen with it. So, and again, in this case, man, that math test did everything for me. I don't even care what preceded it.
Mhm.
It's like we know that there were texts from Ethan to Jennifer, about the spirit or the demon in the house throwing the bowls around, and
Yeah.
she basically said, that's just him. He's just, he thinks the house is haunted, and he's got the Ouija board in the basement. He's just being Ethan being Ethan,
Yeah.
and but when you're handed that math test and it says the things that it says, but most importantly to me, where it's saying that thoughts won't stop, help me.
Mhm.
And you leave your kid in that school, and I don't care what anybody in that school would have been saying to me. If that's me in that seat and that's handed to me, I'm taking my kid out of school right then and right there, and I'm gonna have a long conversation with my child. And if I feel after that conversation that they've got something going on that I need to be exceptionally worried about more than I already am after being handed that piece of paper, then I'm probably taking them to a hospital to get evaluated for a 72-hour hold because I'm worried, number one, about their safety,
Mhm.
and number two, about the safety of others.
Yeah.
I mean, like, to me, there's just like when you're handed that type of note, there's like no one, like, people were giving me pushback on it. I'm like, I ain't hearing it.
Yeah.
Like that in and of itself tells me my kid is begging for help, like unequivocally.
Sure.
Help me. It said it in bold in all caps. Help me. For me, that did it. So, in terms of moving forward in this country, I mean, we're on the hook in a way that we weren't on the hook up until that guilty verdict came in. So, yeah.
Hey, it's Tony Brueski. If you like the podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, and press that bell so you don't miss any of our updates on the cases we're following for you right here at the Hidden Killers podcast from True Crime Today. And thanks